All right, good morning, everybody, and happy race day. It's Daytona Day. It's the final race of the regular season. We got Cup racing on Saturday night under the lights. So looking forward to tonight. The Xfinity race was pretty good. Definitely a lot of action and wrecks and a lot of overtime attempts there. So hopefully you guys had a profitable day on Friday, but we got Cup racing today, and then believe it or not, we actually have truck racing tomorrow. So a little bit of kind of a unique schedule this weekend. So this video, you've probably heard it, bajillion times if you've been playing NASCAR DFS, but we'll real quickly just kind of go over our strategy and approach, and obviously some of the plays that we like today. So, the narrative that you're going to hear, the strategy is going to be quote unquote stack to back. Don't really have to overthink it. When you get to these super speedway races, because we're pack racing, because all the teams are, it's kind of the great equalizer per se. All the teams are going to be right next to each other. Pricing really doesn't matter. I'm not really worried about dominator points. Like, yeah, you can maybe get a driver who leads you some laps led points if we get like a single file train and they finish well, but for the most part, fast laps are going to be, or laps that I should say, you can maybe predict, but fast laps on the other hand are just going to be kind of distributed throughout the field. So, what are we really looking at? Really, I just want to focus on starting positions and ownership. I don't really care too much about the driver. I really don't care too much about the equipment that they're in. I'm just trying to find ways I can get some potential leverage on the field. And then the other thing you have to keep in mind too is there's definitely some, skill and strategy when it comes to, these DFS slates. But at the end of the day, like everyone has a pretty good chance of wrecking. So you also kind of need some luck on your side too. So there's definitely a cash games approach versus like a GPP approach. If you're playing cash games, basically just select all your drivers, 30th on back or 25th on back or 20th on back, whatever your cutoff point that you feel comfortable with, and just, find 6 drivers that start, with that cutoff point on back and lock it in. You're pretty much good to go. Now, when you're playing tournaments, you can still play those cash lineups and they'll probably still do well, assuming that this is a wreck fest. But in order to hit the optimal lineup, you're gonna have to kind of get lucky and nail, some drivers that might start in the middle of the field or maybe even a little bit closer to the front, who start well and are able to finish well. So, you can also be a little bit more aggressive if you're trying to take down a tournament, but just know those more aggressive tournament lines obviously carry a lot more risk. And if you play a driver starting 8th and he wrecks out, it's going to kill your line, versus if you play a driver that starts 34th and wrecks out, you probably still have a good chance of having a decent day. So let's look at the starting grid here. Again, main column I'm looking at is column E, and column E is really going to dictate to me, who's going to be a chalk play, who's going to be a play that I'm interested in, who's a play I don't want any ownership to. So we'll kind of go through it. So yeah, Elliott and Hamlin in the top range there. I think both of them are fine. Both of them give you a lot of, place differential upside. The only problem is they still start in the middle of the pack, which is good. They still have place differential upside, but they're going to carry a lot of ownership. I mean, this is really it for Chase Elliott, whether he makes the playoffs or not. He's going to be very high owned. Denny Hamlin's going to be very high owned, and they can still score really well. You're just going to have a driver in your lineup that carries a lot of ownership. So another thing that I like to do is I usually try to come under the field on the chalk plays, just because if they bust, hey, that's a really good leverage point for me. But obviously if they score well, it's going to hurt the other way as well. Blaney's low ownership for me, basically just based off of where he starts, and he is one of the better super speedway racers, so I know he's going to carry a lot of ownership too. Logano, I think, is fine for tournaments. I think Kyle Busch is fine for tournaments. William Byron, it's going to be another chalky play, just like, just like Elliott. So I would assume Elliott, Hamlin, Byron are going to be very high owned of the kind of 9 to 10K range here. And again, I'm going to have ownership to all 3 of these drivers. I'm going to be building multiple lines. It's just trying to figure out what drivers you want to be aggressive on, what drivers you want to come under the field on, what drivers you want to sprinkle in. How are you going to get different, on the slate? Byron has just good of a chance of wrecking as everyone else. So keep that in mind. But he does start 27th and good equipment, good car. Should easily have a good day if he is able to stay out of the wrecks. Keselowski and Busch are basically in the same boat for me, more kind of sneaky, tournament GPP plays if you're trying to get aggressive. Allgaier kind of started in this range yesterday for the Xfinity Series race, and he even had, a pass-through penalty at the beginning of the race, and it didn't matter at the end of the day. Keselowski and Busch still give you some place differential upside, and they're going to be significantly lower owned than Elliott, Hamlin, and Byron. They're just going to carry a lot more risk, obviously, starting this high. Larson's in the same boat as Blaney, just starts too forward to the front of the field. Same thing with Bubba Wallace. Even though he's a good super speedway racer, he's going to carry ownership. I don't want a driver starting fourth that has a lot of ownership in my line. Truex, I think, is another driver you can kind of throw into the same category as Keselowski and Busch. He's not historically known for being a good super speedway racer. And I guess Keselowski and Busch probably have a better reputation in history when it comes to super speedway racing, but starts 13th. So he has a little bit more downside than upside, but there's still some place differential upside there. So I like him for tournaments. Stenhouse is going to be a really popular, cash games play. I mean, if you're playing cash, it's just, Byron, Stenhouse, McDowell, Bowman. I mean, those are going to be the core plays, really, LaJoy, like those are going to be Gilliland. Like there's your line, basically right there. For cash games or some variation of that. But yeah, Stenhouse won the 500. I mean, this is a good track for him. No reason he shouldn't score well. Again, he's just going to carry a lot of ownership. So it's trying to find the right balance, or just, building multiple lines and getting ownership and spread to variations of these different drivers. Suarez starts 22nd, and I guarantee Suarez is going to be significantly lower owned than Chase Elliott. And they start right next to each other, and he's significantly cheaper. Not that pricing matters, but like if you're looking for a potential pivot option, like there's your first one. Like just little things like that are things that I try to look at on the slate. Just how can I get some leverage there? Chastain, I like Chastain. I don't know how much ownership he's really going to carry. Starts 25th. Another potential nice pivot option off the Elliott and Hamlin, type of chalk plays, or even Byron, for example. I don't think he'll be as high owned as the kind of the top three drivers that we just mentioned there. Not having a great summer, but again, I really just care about starting position and ownership. I don't really care about how you're performing coming into this race, just because Daytona is such a unique type of track and type of racing that we see. Christopher Bell, basically the identical play to Martin Truex Jr. I think fine for tournaments. Tyler Reddick starts basically right in the middle of the field, so it's just as much upside as he does downside. Michael McDowell, Alex Bowman could be high interest. Obviously, you're going to be playing these types of plays in cash games. Hard for them not to score well. The only thing I'm a little concerned about with McDowell, I know he mentioned some equipment issues, I believe, yesterday with qualifying. So I just want to follow up on Twitter today, see if that team was able to figure out what the issue is, fix that issue, and make sure that issue is resolved prior to taking the green flag. So I would advise you to do that as well, but he's going to be extremely high owned. Bowman's going to be extremely high owned. I think Dillon and Cindric are fine, pivot options, fine for tournaments. If you're trying to get different, trying to get some lower owned plays in your lineup, those are the types of plays you can look to. Gibbs and Harvick, Almirola all start too close to the front of the field for me. Eric Jones starts 24th, another, fine pivot play. Again, you could pivot off Chase Elliott and play Eric Jones, and you might be like, well, how's that a 1-to-1, comparison? Obviously, Chase Elliott is going to do better, and he might, he very easily could. But again, it's ownership in positions. So Eric Jones starts right next to Chase Elliott, just like Daniel Suarez does, and I guarantee he'll carry way less ownership than Elliott. So little things like that are things that I'm looking for. Briscoe starts on the pole, has the most amount of downside on the slate. We saw Austin Hill, start on the pole, lead a good amount of laps. That could happen to Chase Briscoe, but, Austin Hill got caught up in a wreck late in that race. They didn't score as well because of the place differential downside, the negative place differential points they scored. Ryan Preece, top 10. We're not really playing drivers in the top 10 for the most part. AJ Allmendinger, fine for tournaments, kind of starts middle of the pack. And it's trying to find a combination too of like, okay, what core place differential plays that I want are like 25th, 30th on back, and maybe what are a couple plays I can sprinkle in that maybe start a little bit closer to the middle of the pack or a little bit closer to the front of the pack. Like those types of lineups usually score well in tournaments, and then for cash games, it's really just jam in all the place differential plays and just hope that you hit the cash line. Honestly, the Joy going to be really high owned, high interest. He's pretty good at these types of tracks. Justin Haley, I like him as another pivot play. Starts deep in the field, should see way less ownership than LaJoy. Todd Gilliland's another good, place differential upside play. Even Josh Berry, Josh Berry will be another nice pivot play just because of the equipment that he's in. No one's going to want to play the 42 car, and I don't blame you. But, even if he loses the lead pack and he just rides around on the track, if he avoids the wrecks, he's going to score well. We see that a lot with some of these equipment that isn't as good. Harrison Burton, probably going to be the lowest owned play on the slate today, I would imagine. Starts third. Could be really hard for him to score well. Can't rule anyone out with NASCAR DFS, but going to be real tough for him. Austin Hill should be pretty low owned, starting 26th, just with the equipment that he's in. But again, he gives you place differential upside, and his ownership should be low. So he's going to be in our player pool. Riley Herbst starts sixth. Probably another play that's going to be really low owned, just like Harrison Burton. But for good reason, it's going to be pretty hard for him to score well. Really, any driver in the top 10, I feel like, is going to have a difficult day unless they finish there. And then you get to these back marker cars, Yaley, Dillon, Poole, McLeod. They're all going to be high interest for me, especially this Daytona, summer race, the night race at Daytona. For whatever reason, because it's a night race, because it's the final race of the regular season, this race historically has been one of the most chaotic races of the super speedway races. So if we come into this race thinking, hey, there's going to be a lot of wrecks, there's going to be a lot of carnage, what are some drivers who can really take advantage and get career types of days? It's going to be the Yaleys, the Dillons, the Pools, McLeods. I mean, some of these drivers got top 10s. A good majority of them got top 10s last year. I believe it was at this track. That's when whoever it was, parlayed a bunch of them and won like $1 million on like a crazy low bet. And obviously you can't do that anymore with the DFS or the different sports books. But I like all these plays, and I know it doesn't feel good plugging them in, especially putting money on them. But everyone's afraid to do it. So don't be afraid to play these back markers. Just know that basically with this stack the back, type of strategy, you're going to need wrecks. You're going to need cautions. You're going to need a race like the Xfinity race yesterday, where a good chunk of the field has issues. A good chunk of the field doesn't finish the race, has a lot of damage. If we don't see that happen, the stack the back strategy probably isn't going to be quote unquote as profitable or maximize the amount of upside potential that it has. But still, the name of the game, even if it is a clean race, dominator points are going to be kind of hard to nail. So it's still place differential upside. The only problem is if we don't get a wreck fest, some of these plays that aren't in great equipment are just going to struggle to finish well. And that's when plays like Chastain, Bowman, Byron, Elliott, Hamlin, like cars that are still starting deeper in the field, but with good equipment, like they should have a pretty good day. So for me, I really like to just build a bunch of lines. I like to hit the randomizer sometimes, try to sprinkle in some of these low owned plays with the chalk plays, and really just kind of sit back and I don't want to say root for wrecks, but hopefully some of my lines, pan out. So I'm going to have a mix of cash games lines, some aggressive tournament lines. I always look forward to these types of races just because you never know what's going to happen. So it's crazy that we're at the regular season finale here. So we'll get the playoff grid locked and loaded, but best of luck today. And we'll probably, I don't know if I'll have a video up for the Truck Series tomorrow or not. We'll kind of see, but I'll definitely have a sheet out. So good luck today and have a good one.